Picking up from this first session of Module 1, where we highlighted the broad issues relating to ICTs and relating to the Millennium Development Goals, I would now like to pick up on a theme of how we can begin to use these tools in terms of addressing what we call the high priority target countries. Specifically, we will look at the digital divide and what it is composed of, and we will also look at promoting universal access. What is this digital divide that people talk about? It's an often confused term. Some people think it is only the difference between having a computer and not having it. But what it is goes beyond just the word digital. Essentially, the digital divide is a gap between individuals and societies that have the resources, and those societies and individuals that do not have resources. So it is, the digital divide is a gap, and the gap is a reflection not just of a technology divide, but it is as a result of several divides. For instance, it's a divide of income, it is a divide of literacy, it is a divide of gender. How is it a divide of income? It's a difference or the gaps between the rich and the poor, the difference between the gaps between the educated and the illiterate, the gaps that gender always provides between the men, women, boys and girls in our societies. So addressing the digital divide needs a perspective that is just broader than issues of information technology and in issues of ICTs. It means that we have to look at a broader perspective at cross-sectoral issues, and it's not a question of putting a computer in a school to bridge a digital divide. So we have to look in much broader terms, in terms of economic gaps, social gaps, cultural gaps, access gaps, and then the overall concept of the divide. When we look at the digital divide and we find that if we are going to use ICTs, the first thing that we have to do is to provide access to technology. Because without providing access to technology, we will simply exacerbate or we will simply increase this kind of a divide. Access is the first step in being able to use technology, whether it is access to radio, television, computers, internet, what have you. So the first thing that we have to do is to begin to look at promoting universal access to technology. What does this mean? What this essentially means is that we have to look at, again, in a broad perspective, and we have to look at addressing the needs of universal access. For that, we have to have enabling environments. We need to have clear enabling policies in countries, and we have to address fundamental constraints to economic development, whether this is access to markets, whether this is access to income, whether this is access to education or health services. It means also that we have to improve infrastructure not just in terms of roads and buildings, but also in terms of what we call information highways, so that telecommunications infrastructure, so that information can reach the very far and isolated people. It means opening up of markets. It means finding access to markets. It means regulation or deregulation and breaking monopolies. It means also effective legal and regulatory systems. And it means, more than anything else, providing education for all. Providing education is necessary because even if you provide access, if people are not educated, they cannot access the information. So how does one go about providing universal access? One cannot leapfrog suddenly and go to what the Asian tigers have evolved. And even in the Asian tigers and even in the countries, there are great divides. One cannot automatically emulate the examples of countries without going through the steps. So the best way of beginning to provide universal access is to begin with baby steps, small methods where countries can look at data processing and teleworking as one method of income generation. Another way of providing universal access, as I mentioned earlier, is to invest in education, formal, non-formal, and ICT. Formal education is necessary, non-formal equally so, and technology education. One has also to create physical infrastructure. And when you cannot provide access to each individual, we can begin to look at providing common service facilities at a community level. But just providing the facilities is not enough. One also has to create portals where information is located and where it is stored. So on the one hand, while we may provide access to the internet to the remote corner, if there is no website or a portal that provides the information that is needed, then the point of providing a common service facility is lost. So we have to build portals of repositories. We also have to build national and regional partnerships to share resources. We cannot all reinvent the wheel each time. We need to be able to share resources to build these partnerships, to build the repositories. What is a common service center? Otherwise described, we can call it as a telecenter. Essentially, you may have seen a simple facility in the corner shop which has a telephone, a fax, a photocopying, and a typing booth. These used to be the earlier simple down-the-road access to telephones and long-distance calls. When they have changed from being simple telephone booths to becoming cyber cafes, it means that there are few computers there which are then linked to the internet on a pay-per-use, so a person can go over there and use a cyber cafe to access information by paying a small price. There are also info shops. In other words, in addition to accessing by yourself information, a provider there might be able to access the information for you and then give it to you. So info shops are also important. A telecenter can be set up as a common service facility by a government in order to provide government services. And there are examples of these available worldwide. And they can go into multi-purpose centers, which not only create materials, but which also serve as repositories of information. So we have a progression, and we can go from a simple shop all the way up to a multi-purpose center. But there are issues that need to be addressed. So when you set up a community service center, you must look at how it is financed and how it is going to be sustainable. Will it be a pay-per-use? Will it be a free facility? What will it be? Who will own and operate this? Will it be a franchise model with a local youth serving as an entrepreneur, or will it be something that is funded? What kind of human resource is necessary to run? What kind of skills do the people who run a telecenter need to have? Do they need to have just internet searching skills, or do they need to have accounting and business skills also? Who houses the telecenter? And people who work there, are they volunteers? Are they paid employees? What needs do they have in terms of training? And what role does the community have to do? And what role does community mobilization? The fact of putting a common service center, if it is not owned and operated by the community, means it is likely that it may not be used. So there is a great importance of the involvement of the community in a telecenter. Without looking at these different aspects of telecenters, we cannot ensure that they succeed and are sustained. We cannot depend forever on an external donor, and when the donor leaves, then the money runs out and the center shuts down. There are many examples of failures of telecenters. But where telecenters have succeeded, it is because they have looked into the various factors that ensure success and sustainability.